Howdy. Okay, so I left Google for Autonomy. That's a TLDR. But to understand what I mean by that and how I got there, I'd like to talk about how I joined Google and what led up to joining Google and ultimately why I left. Before I joined Google, I really got into programming during college. I went to Baylor University for a few years and I had to choose either computer science or electrical engineering. Obviously, I chose computer science. But when I wasn't in class, I was making projects on my own, so actually building stuff. And this is what I talk about when I say it's very important that you build things because that's really where you're learning. It's not from the courses so much. The courses just teach you how to build. Anyways, I built a lot of cool things. I made like some packet editor stuff. That got me into a lot of trouble, which is for another video. But that kind of led me down this path of building for myself. I was making things front end, back end, websites, database stuff, everything. And I really liked that autonomy. But after I got sued, I couldn't pay the bills anymore. So I had to join like a real company. And I joined a small company initially, and it was great. I had a lot of autonomy. I was a lead software developer. Reported directly to the CTO, and I was in charge of making the changes. So I had a few people I was teaching, but I was browsing Reddit one day and I saw this challenge thing where you could enter certain phrases into Google, such as AngularJS Direct. And I entered that a few times, and then the page kind of like goes in, and you're presented with a terminal if you click a button, and there's these challenges. So you have to get through like 3 levels of challenges, and it gets progressively harder. And if you do, these are like lead code style challenges, but if you do get through them, then Google will say like the source is with you, reference to Star Wars, and they'll invite you to apply. So I dusted off my resume, I updated it a little bit, and I tried not to mention all the hacky stuff I did back in my college years. So I send that off, and then Google calls me and they say that I'm just gonna like go through the interview process or something. So I get 2 phone screens, and these are kind of where they filter out most of the candidates. So I get through the first one just fine. I'm like, okay, this is great. But then I get like the second phone screen, and this guy's got like a thick, non-English accent. So I don't know what he's saying, and I'm very confused, and I'm pretty sure I bombed that one. But for whatever reason, they decide to continue, and I get to the 5 on-site interviews at Google. And so they fly you out. So I get to on-site, and I've taken like a Red Bull because you wake up early in the morning. I can't wake up at 2 p.m. And I get on site, and I kind of like blow through all the interviews. I'm pretty sure I aced all of them. But it goes over several different things. So one of the interviews was about bit manipulation. One of the interviews was about using a TRIE data structure and parsing a sentence or something. And so it involves like a dictionary stuff, all that jazz. So try was perfect solution. And it goes over an LRU cache with like hash maps, stuff like that, and how you'd implement it. I did all of the interviews using Python. Even though I don't code in Python, it's a really nice interview language because it's very succinct and you don't have to write a lot of code. The important thing when I was doing the interviews, though, was I said out loud my thought process. So if you ever watch one of my streams, I kind of say out loud as I'm coding. Very similar concepts for interviews, and it got me through. After that, I cried a lot when I got accepted into Google. But before then, I had to do like some team interviews. So once you pass the on-site interviews, you get like a handful of team interviews because they're trying to like figure out the fit, and you have to pick a team. If you don't pick a team, you don't get the job. So they call you, and then it's kind of just like a feel for the team, right? And I wasn't interested in any of the teams except for one because the manager was super awesome. He shared with me that HR had actually told him, like, "Oh, I don't know about hiring this person. Look at the past with the hacking stuff, right?" But he said it was a bonus because I knew how to reverse engineer, which is a very valuable skill as a programmer. I was very excited. I accepted the job, and then I cried a lot, not on the phone, but it was rough because I went from Texas. I had to fly across the country, leaving all my friends behind, and it was hard. I had to start up in San Francisco, and San Francisco was rough because I get there, right? And I was staying at a really cheap hostel when I first arrived because I've got to find a place to live. So I picked this place, and everyone was real friendly, maybe a little bit too friendly. So one guy walked with me to Market Street or something, and I was like, okay, this is all right, have fun. Because the particular person that was walking with me wasn't, they were interesting. Okay. So the reason why is because the hostel I chose was in the Tenderloin. Basically, if you don't know, Tenderloin is like the neighborhood that you just kind of want to avoid if you're in San Francisco. There's a lot of really nice places, like the East Cut is really nice. And then there's like some others that are really nice, just not the Tenderloin. Anyways, so I get a place. It's like a studio apartment, paying way more than I was before. No air conditioning, bit of a downgrade. So my living condition went from being pretty good to not so great when I moved to San Francisco. And of course, cost of living was like 50% higher, maybe a little bit more. When I took the job at Google, I went from making about like 80 to 100K to making 120 to 130K. So all in all, I think I was actually worse off taking the job at Google. And instead of being a lead developer, I was now like an entry level, like SUI 3. So it's like SUI 3 and then SUI 4 and then senior. So that was like way, way lower. But it's Google, so it looks good on a resume. So that's kind of why I took the job. Anyways, when I started at Google, my first day it was raining and I had to find a shuttle because I had to go down to the Mountain View campus for orientation. It was like a week-long orientation. And so I'm like jogging through the rain. Someone's trying to sell me drugs on the side of the road, and I just run by him. Something about like a magical time. And I get to the bus stop, I get on the shuttle, and the Googlers are so nice. One of them even offered his umbrella. So I had this really fancy umbrella on the first day at Google. Super friendly person. Of course, I returned the umbrella. The thing I noticed is that a lot of Googlers are really nice and also really smart. Most of them have graduated from something like Stanford or UC Berkeley. Anyways, so I get to orientation, and at this point, I had to choose the username that I wanted at Google. My LDAP, I think, is what it's called. I don't remember. But you also have to choose your laptop, and you have many choices. You have the MacBook Pro, or you can go with a Linux laptop, or the MacBook Pro, or you can choose the Google Chromebook, or the MacBook Pro, or you can choose the Windows machine, or the MacBook Pro. So many choices. Now, I didn't know that, so I went with the Linux laptop, and I get there to orientation. Everybody had a MacBook Pro. There was one person with Windows, like one person with Linux, maybe two people with Linux. I don't remember. But basically, we kind of just like formed a group of non-MacBook users, and then everybody else was MacBook. It's also where I learned how to ride a bicycle because I didn't know how to ride a bike. And it turns out that when you're in Sunnyvale or Mountain View, one of the most common ways to get around is through a bicycle. So I learned how to ride a bike during orientation. And it's super great to learn in Sunnyvale or Mountain View because when you're getting to the buildings, Google's kind of already thought of this. They have these nice bushes. And so you have a nice way to stop. So you just kind of like go into the bushes, and that's how I would stop on my Google bike. I didn't hurt myself. Hopefully, I didn't hurt the bushes. Sorry, Google. But very convenient location for the bushes. Anyways, I get the orientation and I start my job in San Francisco, right? And I'm on Android Performance. At first, it was really great. I had a super awesome manager, brilliant guy. He must have known like freaking everything about Android. He knows a lot. Anyways, I did some stuff with like some resource library things and all that jazz. Nothing too interesting, but I did really good the first few years at Google. And then it was rough. Like I wanted to do other things. And I like React, I like TypeScript, I like front end, I like to work on a whole bunch of different stuff. I want to do some back end, I want to do some front end. I just want to be able to work on like end to end stuff, like what I do right now with Funi. But my role was very focused and very narrow. When I left Google, I was working on porting someone else's project from like one version to another, like a major version. But the problem is that it wasn't backwards compatible, which made that whole process a royal pain. And they owned the code base, so I couldn't just make changes to the code base. So there was a lot of like political stuff anytime you wanted to make a change to the code base, and not really my thing. If you know how I code Funi, I like to just be able to make changes directly. But anyways, I had a few reasons why I left. So I left because they wanted me in the office, right? I had a new manager at this point, and their style was very in office, and I didn't want to be in the office. I wanted to be a remote worker. I feel like I'm much more effective as a remote worker. It's much quieter. I can actually focus. It's not an open office floor plan. So, remote work, much better. And I felt like I was stagnant in my career. I was focused on the back end, but I really wanted to go back to being able to make full applications, front end, back end, everything. And I felt like I could learn more on my own. And I think I have over the years since I've left Google. I feel like I've learned way more than if I had stayed at Google. I was also working in C++ at the time, and I don't care for C++. It's what I started with. I used C++ for making like packet editor and a memory editor and a DLL injector, some other things, but it's not my it was not my first choice. Nowadays, I like to use TypeScript and different programming languages that are like much faster to build things and iterate on. And so, I'm not a big fan of the C++ thing. I also had a few personal factors. My mom's health was declining at the time, and I wanted to spend more time with her. She's always had bad health ever since I was young. She had like 4 brain surgeries in her life, and she'd had like a triple heart bypass, and she was like a bit overweight, not like mega overweight, but overweight enough. Didn't have a good diet, didn't exercise. So that was always really rough, and I always didn't know like how long she had left. But at this point, before I left, she was on hospice, meaning she had like less than 6 months to live. And that was really rough, especially because I had to go into office. I wanted to leave for that reason as well. And it also aligned up with my vesting period for RSUs. So if you don't know, RSUs are like these stocks that you receive when you work at a company, but they vest on a schedule. So you'll receive some of them every couple months, and then you'll have a big burst where you receive a bunch on a certain day, and then there'll be like a period of time where you're not receiving any more. So I timed it so that I left right as they all vested, and min-maxing, really. Um, but like all of those factors kind of combined made me want to quit. And so I did. I felt like I had enough of a nest egg saved up, enough of a runway that I could work on my own stuff. And even if it took me like a year or 2 years, I would still be fine. Even if it was like 4 years, it'd still be okay. So I left, and now I'm work on my own. I work on Funi, and things are pretty great. But that's mostly why I left. There were a lot of really cool things about Google. When I first joined, I really enjoyed the vacations. So, first year I got to go to Lake Tahoe, and that was one of the most memorable parts of my life because I went there with all the other coworkers and everything. We had like all sorts of events, and it was like a multi-day offsite. It was incredible. And if that had still stayed the same, I probably would still be at Google actually, just because of how much of an impact that had on my life, regardless of money or anything like that. I just really enjoyed that socializing, but that also got cut back. When I left, it was just Great America every year. It's kind of one of those things where like I left because I wasn't growing, I wasn't earning. Like it still would have been a year plus until I became a senior software engineer at Google. And so I was like, I didn't feel valued, right? So I wasn't learning, I wasn't earning, and there was really no reason for me to stay. That's why I left.